A Boeing 747.524 people on board, cruising at 24,000 feet. Then, without warning, the entire tail section rips away. No hydraulics, no flight controls, no cabin pressure, no oxygen. The aircraft is essentially a 400-ton glider with engines stumbling through the sky, completely out of control. But somehow, against all odds, the crew kept that dying plane in the air for 32 agonizing minutes. 4 pilots later tried to replicate what happened in a flight simulator. All 4 crashed within minutes. None of them could match what the real crew accomplished that day. This is the story of human courage in the face of impossible odds. This is the story of engineering failure and the ultimate test of pilot skill. This is the story of Japan Airlines Flight 123. August 12, 1985. Tokyo's Haneda Airport is packed. It's the height of Obina Japanese Buddhist festival, where families travel to their hometowns to honor their ancestors. Think of it like Thanksgiving in America, but with even more people traveling. Every flight is overbooked. Every gate is crowded, and Japan Airlines Flight 123 is no exception. This is a routine domestic flight Tokyo to Osaka. Just 54 minutes in the air, barely enough time to reach cruising altitude before beginning descent. It's one of the busiest air routes in the world, and YAL operates it multiple times daily. But today, Flight 123 is special. Or rather, the aircraft itself is special, though not in a good way. The Boeing 747 parked at the gate carries a hidden weakness, a flaw that's been growing for 7 years, a structural defect that neither the pilots nor the engineers know exists. And today, that flaw is about to kill 520 people. Let's meet the men in the cockpit. Captain Masami Takahama, 49 years old. A veteran pilot with 12,423 hours of flight time. He's flown this route hundreds of times. He knows every mountain, every approach, every weather pattern between Tokyo and Osaka. First Officer Yutaka Sasaki, 39 years old. He has 3,963 hours of experience and is in line for promotion to captain. This flight is part of his evaluation process, his chance to prove he's ready for the left seat. Flight Engineer Hiroshi Fukuda, 46 years old. His job is to sit behind the pilots and monitor the aircraft's technical systems, fuel, hydraulics, electrical systems, pressurization. He watches it all. These are not rookies. These are seasoned professionals at the top of their game. The cabin crew consists of 12 flight attendants, trained to handle emergencies. In the passenger cabin, 509 people settle into their seats. Families heading home for the holiday. Business travelers making a quick trip. Children excited about seeing grandparents. None of them know they're sitting in a plane with a ticking time bomb in its tail section. 6:04 p.m. The doors close. Captain Takahama taxis to runway 15 left. The weather in Tokyo is clear, but thunderstorms are developing across Japan. Air traffic control has instructed Flight 123 to take a slightly longer route over the ocean to avoid the weather. No problem. This is a short flight anyway. At 6:12 p.m., clearance comes through. Captain Takahama advances the thrust levers. For massive engines roar to life. The Boeing 747 accelerates down the runway, lifts smoothly into the evening sky, and begins its climb. Everything is normal. Routine. Just another flight. For 12 minutes, everything goes perfectly. The aircraft climbs through 10,000 feet, 15,000 feet, 20,000 feet. First Officer Sasaki is handling the controls beautifully. Flight Engineer Fukuda's panel shows all systems normal. Captain Takahama is relaxed, monitoring the flight path. At 6:24 p.m., Flight 123 levels off at 24,000 feet over Sagami Bay. And then everything changes. Without warning, a massive explosion rocks the aircraft. The sound is deafening, like a bomb going off inside the fuselage. Passengers scream. Objects fly through the cabin. Oxygen masks drop from the ceiling. In the cockpit, the crew hears it clearly. The cockpit voice recorder captures the sound, a sharp, violent bang, followed by rushing wind. Here's what just happened. though the crew doesn't know it yet. The entire tail section, the vertical stabilizer, the rudder, the auxiliary power unit has been ripped away from the aircraft. Gone. Just. ... A massive hole has opened in the rear pressure bulkhead. The pressurized air inside the cabin is now violently escaping into the unpressurized tail cone. That escaping air has enough force to tear metal. Think of it this way. At 24,000 feet, the air pressure inside the cabin is like being at sea level. The air pressure outside is much, much lower, like being on top of a mountain. The cabin is essentially a balloon being inflated to about 8 pounds per square inch more than the outside air. When that pressure bulkhead failed, it was like popping a balloon. The pressurized air rushed toward the tail with explosive force, tearing through aluminum like tissue paper. The tail section separated from the aircraft and tumbled into the ocean below. In the cockpit, confusion reigns. Captain Takahama, what happened? First Officer Sasaki. I don't know. Something exploded. Flight Engineer Fukuda. The cabin altitude is climbing. They can't see behind them. They don't know the tail is gone, but they can feel something is terribly wrong. The aircraft begins to oscillate, pitching up and down, rolling left and right. The autopilot disconnects. Warning, alarms start blaring. Captain Takahama takes control and immediately notices the plane isn't responding normally. When he moves the control yoke, nothing happens. Or rather, something happens, but it's not what he commanded. On the ground in Sagami Bay, a man happens to be looking up at the sky. SC's Flight 123, passing overhead, and notices something strange. He grabs his camera and snaps a photo. That photo would later become crucial evidence. It clearly shows the vertical stabilizer and rudder are completely missing from the tail. Back in the cockpit, Flight Engineer Fukuda delivers devastating news. Hydraulic pressure is dropping. All 4 hydraulic systems are shown on his panel. Red lights. Pressure gauges falling. Within seconds, all hydraulic pressure reaches 0. For those who don't know aviation, let me explain what this means. Modern aircraft, especially large jets like the 747, don't have mechanical connections between the cockpit controls and the flight surfaces. When a pilot moves the control yoke, they're not physically moving cables or rods. They're sending electrical signals to hydraulic These actuators use pressurized hydraulic fluid to move the ailerons, elevators, rudder, flaps, and spoilers. These surfaces generate enormous aerodynamic forces too strong for any human to move by hand, especially at 500 miles per hour. Without hydraulic pressure, those flight controls become useless. Dead weight. The pilots can move the yoke and rudder pedals all they want, but nothing on the aircraft will respond. It's like losing the steering wheel, brakes, and gas pedal of your car while driving down a mountain road at 100 miles per hour. Captain Takahama and First Officer Sasaki are now flying a 400-ton aircraft with no flight controls. They can't turn, they can't climb or descend in a controlled manner. They can't slow down properly. All they have left, ... are the engines. Captain Takahama immediately switches the transponder to 7700 FA Universal Emergency Code. Every air traffic control facility in Japan now knows Flight 123's. In trouble, he radios Tokyo Control Japan Air, 123. Request immediate return to We have an emergency. Controller, Roger, 123. You're cleared. Direct to Haneda. Descend and maintain 22,000 feet. What is the nature of your emergency? Captain Takahama, rapid decompression. We've lost hydraulic systems. Request priority handling. Behind this calm radio exchange, the cockpit is chaos. The aircraft is now in what's called a phugoid oscillation, a porpoising motion where the nose pitches up and down in a rhythmic pattern. Each cycle takes about 90 seconds. The plane climbs, loses speed, stalls slightly, pitches down, gains speed, climbs again. Without the horizontal stabilizer which was attached to the tail section that's now gone, the aircraft is inherently unstable. But Captain Takahama is thinking. He's a pilot with more than 12,000 hours of experience. He's been in tough situations before. And he's not giving up. He realizes they still have 4 engines. And engines produce thrusts, and thrusts can be manipulated. If he increases power on the left engines and decreases power on the right engines, the aircraft will turn right. If he does the opposite, it will turn left. If he increases power on all engines during the downward part of the oscillation, he can pull the nose up. If he reduces power during the upward part, he can push the nose down. It's crude. It's imprecise. But it might work. The immediate problem is cabin pressure. With a massive hole in the rear fuselage, the cabin cannot maintain pressure. At 24,000 feet, passengers and crew are at risk of hypoxia oxygen deprivation. Hypoxia is insidious. It starts with confusion and poor judgment. Your movements become slow and uncoordinated. Eventually, you lose consciousness. And if you don't get oxygen soon, you die. The oxygen masks have dropped automatically. Passengers are putting them on, but they only provide oxygen for about 12 to 15 minutes. The crew needs to descend to an altitude where people can breathe without supplemental oxygen, ideally below 10,000 feet. But descending in a controlled manner without elevators is nearly impossible. Captain Takahama has an idea. Lower the landing gear. First Officer Sasaki looks confused. We're at 24,000 feet. I know, lower the gear. The landing gear creates drag, lots of it. Normally, this is bad because it slows you down and burns more fuel. But right now, drag is exactly what they need. The hydraulic system is dead, so the gear can't be lowered normally. But there's a gravity extension system, mechanical releases, that allow the gear to simply fall down under its own weight. Flight engineer Fukuda pulls the gravity extension handle. The landing gear drops and locks into place. The effect is immediate. The aircraft slows. The nose pitches down. They're descending. By 6:35 p.m., 11 minutes after the explosion, Flight 123 has descended from 24,000 feet to 13,500 feet. The cabin pressure is better. People can breathe. The immediate threat of hypoxia has passed. But now they face an even bigger problem: getting back to Haneda Airport. They're currently over mountainous terrain west of Tokyo. To return to Haneda, they need to execute a right turn of about 90 degrees. Simple in a normal aircraft, almost impossible in their current condition. Captain Takahama and First Officer Sasaki begin coordinating their engine inputs. Increase power on engines 1 and 2. Takahama orders, power increasing. Sasaki confirms. The left engines roar louder. Slowly, agonizingly. Slowly the nose begins to swing right, but something goes wrong. As the aircraft turns, it also rolls. The right wing dips down. 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 40 degrees. Bank angle. Bank angle. The automated warning system calls out, Captain Takahama, reduce the bank. Reduce the bank. First Officer Sasaki is already pulling back on the yoke and increasing power on the right engines. But the aircraft keeps rolling. 60 degrees. 70 degrees. They're on the verge of entering an uncontrollable spiral. If they exceed 90 degrees of bank, the aircraft will flip inverted and plummet to the ground. Somehow, even aviation experts can't fully explain how. The crew manages to stop the roll and bring the wings back to level. But the struggle has taken them away from their intended course. They are no longer heading toward Tokyo. They're heading deeper into the mountains of central Japan. The sun is setting. Visibility is decreasing. And they're running out of options. At 6:46 p.m., Captain Takahama makes a critical decision. We can't make it to Haneda. Look for an emergency landing site. They scan the terrain below. Mountains. Forests. Small valleys. No airports. No highways. No fields. Flight engineer Fukuda suggests Nagoya Airport. It's ahead of them, maybe 50 miles away. But getting there requires navigation, and they can barely control their heading. The aircraft is now at 6,800 feet and descending. The terrain below is rising. There in a valley, surrounded by mountains. Captain Takahama, right turn. Mountain ahead. They increase power on the left engines. The nose swings right, but not fast enough. They try to climb, but without elevator control. Climbing is difficult. The mountain is getting closer. The cockpit voice recorder captures the final moments. Las 6:54 p.m. Captain Takahama. Power more. Power. First Officer Sasaki. It's not climbing. We're not climbing. Flight Engineer Fukuda. We're descending. They're caught in a trap. To climb, they need more speed. To get more speed, they need to descend. But descending now means hitting the mountain that's directly ahead. Las 6:55 p.m. Captain Takahama. Nose up. Pull up, Sasaki. I'm pulling. It's not responding. The aircraft's nose rises slightly, but not enough. The airspeed drops dangerously low. They're on the edge of a stall. Las 6:56 p.m. The ground proximity warning system activates. Pull up! Pull up! Captain Takahama, max power! Give me max power! All four engines roar at full thrust. But it's too late. At 6:56 p.m., Japan Airlines Flight 123 strikes the ridge of Mount Takamagara. The impact is catastrophic. The aircraft disintegrates on contact. Wreckage scatters across the mountainside. Fire engulfs everything. Of the 524 people on board, only 4 survive. The 4 survivors, all passengers, were found in the wreckage the next morning. Yumi Ochiai, a 26-year-old off-duty flight attendant. Keiko Kawakami, a 12-year-old girl. Hiroko Yoshisaki, a 34-year-old woman. Mikiko Yoshisaki, an 8-year-old girl. Hiroko's daughter. All 4 were seated in the center section of the aircraft on the left side. This section somehow remained partially intact during the crash. Their survival is nothing short of miraculous. But their stories also revealed a heartbreaking detail. Many passengers survived the initial impact. Yumi Ochiai later testified that she heard people calling for help in the darkness, moaning and crying. But rescue crews didn't reach the crash site until the next morning, more than 14 hours after the crash. By then, most of those who had initially survived had died from their injuries or from exposure during the cold mountain night. Some experts believe that if rescue efforts had been faster, dozens more lives could have been saved. Investigators from Japan's Aircraft Accident Investigation Commission, along with Boeing engineers and NTSB representatives, descended on Mount Takamagara. What they found shocked the aviation world. The rear pressure bulkhead, a dome-shaped metal structure that separates the pressurized cabin from the unpressurized tail, cone had failed catastrophically. When they examined the wreckage, they discovered why 7 years earlier. In 1978, the same aircraft registration, Hawocho 119, had suffered a tail strike during landing at Osaka Airport. The tail section scraped along the runway, causing structural damage to the rear pressure bulkhead. The aircraft was sent to Boeing's facility for repairs. Boeing engineers installed a splice plate to reinforce the damaged bulkhead, but they made a critical mistake. Instead of using a single splice plate that overlapped the entire damaged area, they used 2 splice plates that met in, and instead of overlapping the joint with a second row of rivets for redundancy, they used only a single row. This meant that each rivet was carrying twice the load it was designed to handle. Every time the aircraft pressurized and deep single flight, those rivets were stressed beyond their design limits. Microscopic cracks began forming. Over 7 years and 12,319 pressurization cycles, those cracks grew. On August 12, 1985, during the 12,320th pressurization cycle, the bulkhead finally gave way. After the investigation concluded, researchers wanted to know something. Could the crew have done anything differently? They programmed a flight simulator with the exact conditions of Flight 123. No hydraulic pressure, no rudder or vertical stabilizer, no elevators or horizontal stabilizer, only engine thrust for control. Then they invited 4 highly experienced pilots to attempt to fly the simulator under these conditions. The results were sobering. All 4 pilots crashed within minutes. None of them could keep the aircraft controllable for more than a few minutes. None of them could match the 32 minutes that Captain Takahama and his crew had maintained control. And remember, these simulator pilots had two enormous advantages. First, they knew in advance what had failed. They weren't frantically trying to diagnose the problem while fighting to control the aircraft. Second, they knew it was a simulation. They weren't facing the psychological terror of imminent death. Their families weren't going to perish if they failed. Despite these advantages, they all failed where the real crew had succeeded at least temporarily. Japan Airlines Flight 123 remains the deadliest single aircraft's accident in aviation history. 520 people died that day. The crash devastated Japan. The nation mourned. Families were destroyed. The airline industry was shaken to its core. But from this tragedy came crucial safety improvements. Bulkhead inspections. Boeing issued service bulletins requiring detailed inspections of rear pressure bulkheads on all 747s. Similar inspections were mandated for other aircraft types. Repair procedures. Boeing completely revised its structural repair procedures. All repairs to critical pressure vessels now require multiple layers of redundancy and are subject to rigorous quality control checks. Hydraulic redundancy. Aircraft manufacturers began researching ways to provide backup control systems that don't rely on hydraulics. Some modern aircraft now have electrical backup flight control systems. Emergency response. Japan improved its emergency response procedures for mountain crashes, including better coordination between military and civilian rescue services. But perhaps the most important lesson was about human factors. Captain Takahama, First Officer Sasaki, and Flight Engineer Fukuda demonstrated extraordinary skill, courage, and teamwork. During those 32 minutes, they faced an impossible situation and did everything humanly possible to save their aircraft. They didn't survive, but their actions during those final minutes captured on the cockpit voice recorder became a case study in crew resource management and crisis I want you to understand something about those final minutes in the cockpit. Imagine you're driving down the highway at 70 miles per hour. Suddenly, your steering wheel comes off in your hands. The brake pedal stops working. The gas pedal is stuck. You'll have maybe 30 seconds before you crash. That's roughly what Captain Takahama and his crew experienced, except they were 5 miles in the air, traveling at 500 miles per hour, with 509 people depending on them. And instead of 30 seconds, they had to manage that situation for 32 minutes. 32 minutes of constant crisis management, of trying every possible solution, of using techniques that weren't in any manual, of fighting with engines alone to do what normally requires a dozen different flight controls. The cockpit voice recorder reveals their professionalism. Even as the situation became hopeless, they never stopped trying. They never gave up. Right until the final moment of impact, they were working together to save the aircraft. Captain Takahama's last words on the recorder. Pull up. He was trying to save lives until the very end. Today, on the ridge of Mount Takamagara, there stands a memorial. It's a simple structura stone monument surrounded by flowers that are constantly refreshed by visiting families. 520 names are carved into the stone. Every year, on August 12th, families of the victims climb the mountain to pay their respects. Former Japan Airlines employees make the trek. Aviation professionals from around the world visit to honor those who died and to remember the lessons learned. The site is peaceful now. Trees have grown back. Nature has reclaimed the mountainside. But the memory remains. August 12th, 1985. A routine 54-minute flight, a hidden flaw that had existed for 7 years. A catastrophic failure at 24,000 feet. 3 men in a cockpit: Captain Masami Takahama, First Officer Yutaka Sasaki, Flight Engineer Hiroshi Fukuda faced an impossible situation. An aircraft with no controls, 509 passengers depending on them, mountains rising below them. They fought for 32 minutes. They used skills no training had prepared them for. They improvised solutions that had never been tried before. 4 simulator pilots later tried to replicate what they did. All 4 failed within minutes. The real crew lasted 32 minutes against impossible odds. That's not just skill, that's courage. That's dedication. That's the best of what humanity can achieve in the face of catastrophe. 520 people died on Mount Takamagara, but the courage of those 3 pilots and the lessons learned from this tragedy hath saved countless lives in the years since. Sometimes, even in our darkest moments, even when facing certain death, the human spirit refuses to surrender. That's what Japan Airlines Flight 123 taught the world. This has been Nitrogen Monoxide Signal. Until next time, stay aware.